So good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for today's education session. Today's topic is going to be all about recognizing and reducing caregiver stress. So one of the things that we often recognize for many of our caregivers and family members through the dementia journey is that at some points during that journey, they may face some stress. And it's really, really important to not ignore the signs, to be able to recognize them, and then to be able to respond with ways to reduce that stress. Because as many of us know, and as many of us have heard, that long-term stress can really impact our brain health and our health and well-being. So we want to be just very careful about how to do this. And this was one of the sessions that we originally had planned to deliver in person in April, and unfortunately due to our COVID situation, we had to cancel it. So we wanted to make sure that it was provided in one of our Zoom sessions. So I hope this information will be really helpful for you today. Again, feel free to ask questions at any time as we go through. So providing care for anyone, really, anyone that's ever been a caregiver recognizes that being able to provide that level of care can be significant, can have a lot of impact. And so when we, consider when a person has memory loss or dementia, we also know that that caregiver assumes a lot of responsibility. And it can take a toll on the person's physical and emotional health. So as I just mentioned, we want to make sure that we're not that we're not ignoring the signs and that we recognize those signs. So we have often found that lots of caregivers don't know what the signs are of stress, or they just deny the effects that it's having on their health and well-being. So they may shrug it off and say things like, well, it's a labor of love, or, this is what I need to do right now, but they don't always recognize the impact overall that it's having on them. Many caregivers also set their own needs aside when they're caring for that person. And I've heard a few caregivers say, well, if I don't really think about it, maybe the stress will just go away and it won't become any worse. I'll just keep going. I'll keep plugging away at this. And they start to ignore those signs. As dementia progresses, we see a lot of changes in the person with memory loss or dementia. So we can see that memory loss increasing. We can see changes in the person's judgment and their problem-solving abilities, in their ability to make decisions. And so the care provider may have to step in and assist with some of those tasks and activities. They may need assistance for other daily tasks. So things that the person has normally been able to take on, maybe now the caregiver needs to step in and assist. With communication difficulties, we start to see that as things progress, the person may not be able to have that communication as successfully as they once did. So they may have to start to rely on other ways of trying to make that communication more successful. So using nonverbal communication, trying to have conversations in different ways with, reduced background noise, reduced, extra stimulation and so on. And so that also can take a toll on the caregiver who is really trying to make that communication happen in a successful way. Sometimes behavioral changes happen as brain changes continue to occur, and many caregivers often aren't prepared for some of those changes. So they may have questions about it. They may wonder if they're, addressing those changes effectively. And there's always lots of questions around, what should I do? What should I not do? And so on. And so we also see those behavior changes providing a bit of an impact to the stress of a caregiver. And overall, we see an increasing reliance on care providers. So, just overall, it may be that the person's often managed their own finances, or, They've been able to go to the grocery store on their own or drive themselves where they need to go. But as the brain changes continue to happen, they may look to the caregiver more and more to help provide assistance with some of those tasks. In terms of the network of care, when you start to look all around the person, when you're thinking of all the different individuals that are involved in the person with dementia's life, we often look to the primary caregiver as the person who provides the majority of that care or support. So, that can often be the spouse. In some situations it is. Sometimes it's an adult child, or it could also be another family member that's looking after and supporting that person. We also have secondary caregivers. So it could be extended family members or friends. Even in the past, I've met neighbors or members of the person's church community that have provided that level of care as well. So it can be very different in many different situations. Medical professionals and social service professionals, volunteers, can be part of that network of care. And the same with social clubs or social organizations and groups. As I mentioned, the church community and neighbors that may be close to that person. They may, have known each other for a significant period of time and want to reach out and provide that level of support and care. So there's many different situations and many different kind of spindles in that network of care. And it's the experience of caregivers that changes as the dementia journey continues. And so, as I mentioned before, we see increasing responsibilities. So things that the caregiver may step in and help to assume or share responsibility for. We may also see changes in the caregiver's role in that person's life. So they could take on, for example, the power of attorney role. So the power of attorney for property or personal care, or a substitute decision maker where they need to step in and make, or take on some of the responsibilities for that person's overall financial future, financial care, also personal care decisions they may need to provide that assistance for if the person with dementia loses that capacity to make those decisions for themselves. We may also see changes in the relationship that they may have with that person. So we've often heard caregivers and family members mention that they feel a bit of a loss of connection with that individual. Again, as the brain continues to change, they may look to that person for emotional support, but it may not be the same as it once was. So they may be reeling from that as well. And unfortunately, a lot of our caregivers and family members do report that they feel much more isolated, much more socially isolated from others. And, this is really the case these days, especially due to COVID-19, when many of us are experiencing social isolation. It's very, very difficult for care providers of people with dementia. And so, it is that difficulty maintaining those strong social connections, being with others that may help them get through some of the stress that they're experiencing. So I've heard so many people lately say that they feel very disconnected. And, we'll talk about in a little bit about some of the different ways that we may have to modify the way that we reach out to others. And some of us are already doing that. And so we can talk about some of those ways to make that a little bit easier. And of course, one of the most significant experiences for caregivers is the ambiguous loss and grief that they may feel. If you haven't yet been able to attend one of our sessions on ambiguous loss and grief, I sure hope that you will in the future. We do have an entire education session around this because we recognize how important it is for care providers and family members to recognize that loss and grief still exists, even if the person is still with us, the person is still here, right? So I think it's one of those things that is not always understood unless you are caring for somebody with dementia. The person's still here, but they're changing. Their brain is changing, and so are the abilities for them to do the things that they've always enjoyed doing. And so, as caregivers, we may grieve those changes and not really know how to deal with them, and that can add to the stress as well that we're talking about today. So, as I said, caring for somebody requires time and energy. It can be often demanding, it can be stressful. Um, but knowing and recognizing the signs, it's really, really important. It's the first step to really take action is to recognize that something is changing. And I wanted to talk about the 10 key signs of caregiver stress. What's important to recognize from these signs of stress? They're occurring on a regular basis. If they're increasing, if they're becoming more persistent, it is important to talk with your doctor about this or to talk with somebody from the Alzheimer's Society to try to find ways to manage that stress, because long-term stress can really have an impact on your health and well-being. So let's talk about some of the signs of caregiver stress. The first one that can happen is denial. And it's really about the denial of the disease. And I have talked to a lot of caregivers and family members in the past that say, you know, I don't really think that this is going to matter. I think that, the person's going to get better. I think everyone is overreacting right now. And that is a very natural response to first hearing about that diagnosis. So denial about the disease is not uncommon, but it is important to recognize that the effects that it can have on the person who's living with it. So denial is common, and it's important to recognize that sign. Anger is another sign of caregiver stress, and it can be anger towards the person with dementia. It can be anger towards, yourself as the care provider. It could be also anger towards other people. You might be finding yourself saying things like, "Oh my goodness, if he asked me that question one more time, I'm going to scream," or I'm just so angry right now with the way things are. It's not unusual to see anger. However, it can be a sign of stress that we need to pay attention to. Withdrawing socially, that really is about not wanting to maintain contact or staying in touch with family and friends, or participating in activities that you've always enjoyed. That's what we refer to as withdrawing. You might find yourself saying things like, I just don't care to get together with family and friends, or I don't have time to do that particular task or that activity that I always enjoyed. You may find yourself making excuses um, for why you're withdrawing. Anxiety can also be a huge sign of caregiver stress. And it could be anxiety related to, facing another day, and what does the future hold. It's a very difficult journey in many situations, because we don't know what the future has in store, and each day can be different. So, you know caregivers may worry about, well, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen if I can no longer provide care, and so on. So that anxiety is a sign of stress that we also don't want to ignore. Depression. Depression is when you feel sad or hopeless or detached much of the time. You may find that that's starting to persist or increase for you. You may find yourself saying things like, I don't care anymore. What's wrong with me? This isn't like me. Again, one of the symptoms that we definitely want to pay close attention to. Now, I know number 6, exhaustion. For anybody that's ever cared for a family member or a friend, Exhaustion can be a huge impact on our physical health and well-being. It's kind of part and parcel for caring for somebody. But you may find that with that exhaustion, you barely have the energy to complete those daily tasks and activities that have never really posed a problem for you. Now you look at it and you think, oh, I just don't have the energy to do the laundry or to wash these dishes today. And perhaps you're finding that you're saying that more and more as each day unfolds. So that exhaustion can have a huge impact on stress and health and well-being. I also know that a lot of caregivers have mentioned the sleep issues that they may see when caring for somebody. So the sleeplessness, maybe you're waking up in the middle of the night, or you're having more nightmares, or you're having very stressful dreams. Those can be signs of caregiver stress. You know, a lot of folks say, I'm not sleeping through the night, and you know, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not feeling refreshed or well rested. That can be a sign that, again, if it's, you know, it's here or there, it happens occasionally, it's not unusual. But if it's starting to increase over time, that's something that we may need to talk with a doctor or a trusted professional about that as well. Emotional reactions. Well, maybe you find yourself crying at minor things, or you find yourself more tearful than normal. You could see an increase in your irritability. Little things like, you know, you woke up this morning to sit down for breakfast and a cup of coffee, and you had no milk for your coffee, and all of a sudden you burst into tears, and that's not like you. Or yelling at somebody in your family member when that normally would never happen. So just experiencing that increase in irritability. Number 9 is the lack of concentration that can accompany, you know, often the fatigue or just so much going on in your mind that you're not able to focus on a particular task or activity to see it through. So you may find yourself saying things like, oh, it's getting harder and harder to complete this particular task. And I've also heard caregivers say something, you know, like as simple as a crossword puzzle. Oh, I used to do the daily crossword puzzle from the newspaper, but I'm lucky if I can even get through half of it now because I can't attend to it for very long. I can't seem to keep that concentration. So if you're finding that that's something that you're noticing, again, it's a sign that we don't want to ignore. And then lastly, a significant sign, and these are in no particular order, by the way, but one that we often recognize in caregivers and family members caring for somebody with dementia or memory loss is that, you know, we may experience health problems related to our overall wellness. So it could be that we're getting colds or flus a lot more often. You know, you might find yourself saying, oh my goodness, this spring, you know, I've either had the cold or a flu and I just can't seem to shake it. I seem to have one after another. It could be that you're losing weight or you're gaining weight. You know, lots of folks experience that weight loss or weight gain as a sign of stress, but it could be other health problems too, more chronic health problems. So you're experiencing more backaches, more tension headaches, even high blood pressure can be signs that that stress is persisting and increasing, and perhaps posing, you know, a significant risk to your health. So all of those things that we have to be aware of. And it's important to not ignore the signs. We really need to look at taking care of ourselves as a caregiver, because you need to think about it from this perspective. You are the most important person in the life of someone with dementia or memory loss. And so recognizing those, you know, those signs of stress definitely get you well on the way to caring for yourself. And I want to next talk about ways that we can reduce that caregiver stress, ways that, you know, may help you over the long term to cope in this journey. And that's one of the other things that can be difficult, is that we don't always know how long that journey will be. So we want to keep ourselves at our very best so that we can be there to support the person with dementia. So let's look at the 10 ways. It's kind of a bit of a balance, right? We've talked about the 10 signs of stress. Let's talk about 10 ways to reduce that stress. So the first, and of course in the work that I do, I feel that this is very important, is learning about the disease, learning as much as you can about, how the disease may unfold, the care strategies that are very important to supporting that person, because that's also going to help you fare through the journey. Understanding how the disease will impact or affect the person will also help you to understand why those changes are occurring, and then therefore maybe give you some ways to help adapt to those changes. So that's really, really important. And that's why we continue to offer the education that we do, because we want to equip caregivers and people living with dementia with ways to live as well as they possibly can when dementia is present. Number 2 is being realistic about the disease too. So we recognize that, it's important, although difficult, to be realistic about what may happen, and how the disease will affect that person over time. If you can be realistic about what is likely to occur, then it's easier for you to adjust your expectations about what may play out, what some of the barriers or challenges may be. So being realistic about understanding the disease is really key. It's also important to be realistic about yourself and about how much you can do as a family member or care provider. It's also about examining what you value most, right, in your life. So only you can answer this question, but what is most important to you? Is it that you want to spend as much time that you can with the person with dementia? And so therefore your day is really shaped around doing things together. Is it recognizing sometimes that you do need time for yourself and carving that out in the day? And when can you do that and for how long? Being realistic about that as well. It's also about things that are important to you, like keeping a tidy house or keeping up a hobby or an interest or maintaining those social connections. Being realistic about how you're able to do those kinds of things while still caring for the person. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's really up to you and how much you can do and what matters most to you. So those 2 things are very, very key. It's also about accepting your feelings. And, when you are a caregiver for somebody with dementia, you can have a lot of mixed feelings. And I want to assure you that those feelings are completely normal. In one single day, you can kind of run the gamut, right? You can start out feeling pretty contented, feeling blessed, but then you may experience anger or anxiety or tearfulness. You may feel guilty during the day. You may feel embarrassed about something that's happened, afraid for the future, helpless or hopeless. All of those emotions are very normal, and it's very difficult to, to think about all of those things happening within a single day. But it is normal. It is normal when those emotions kind of creep in. And it often is based on situations and experiences that happen throughout the day. So recognize that as a care provider or as a family member that you're doing the very best that you can, and know that it's okay to feel those emotions. Sharing information and feelings with other people. So, sharing information about the disease. And this is why in many of our education sessions, the care provider often brings a friend or a family member along with them so that they can learn about the disease too. And they therefore can know how to help out when needed, where they might be able to step in and provide a bit of extra support. So in terms of information, sharing that information can really help to equip others with the information that they need to know to help support the caregiver and the person with dementia. But it's also important for the person to be able to share their feelings with others and what they're going through as a caregiver, as a family member. And so it could be that it's a close friend that you feel comfortable sharing those feelings with. It could be a member of your religious community, a member of your church, for example. It could be somebody that you met in an Alzheimer's support group, or a client support coordinator, or another healthcare professional. But regardless, it is important that you find somebody to share those feelings with, and to get that information out, and to let others know, exactly how you may be feeling at that given time. I think a really difficult strategy, but important strategy is doing our very best to be positive in the situation. Your attitude can make a huge difference in the way that you feel. And it's difficult because sometimes we do focus on the changes and the things that are happening to the person that we love. But it also can help to look at the positive and focusing on what the person can do rather than what is being lost. That sometimes can make things a lot easier. So it's not denying that things aren't changing, but instead of saying, oh, look at all the things that have changed or been lost for that person, let's look at the things that the person is still able to do and really focus and kind of um, build on those strengths and abilities that remain. And to try to make every day count, to try to make every day positive or meaningful in some way, even when things are going wrong and you feel like, oh, this is just a bad day. Try to find one aspect in that day that's positive, that's uplifting for you, and use that to go forward in the journey. Looking for humor is another great way to reduce stress. Um, and we certainly understand that dementia and Alzheimer's disease, they're very serious conditions. We do recognize that. And in knowing that, I've heard a lot of caregivers say, sometimes I need to laugh or I'll cry. And that's okay. Finding the humor in something, looking on the bright side, you know, laughing off the tension of a situation or a little mistake that's made can really help you, again, to move forward, and also to create the rapport with that person that's so important. If you can laugh together, not that you're ever laughing at the person, but using humor as a way of coping with the stress can be very beneficial. Taking care of yourself and your health. I often think that this should be the first strategy, the number one. Again, these aren't in any particular order, but your health is extremely important and we don't want to put it on the back burner. Yes, it's important that you're focusing your time, your energy, all of those tasks on the person that you're caring for, but we also want to make sure that we're not ignoring our own health and well-being. So we want to make sure that we're eating proper meals and that we're exercising regularly, or we're getting out for that walk to clear our minds or just to feel better. And physical activity is a great way for relieving that pent up negative energy as well. Finding ways to relax, to get the rest that you need. And I know that can be tricky sometimes. Making regular appointments with your doctor and checking in about your health and well-being too. Taking regular breaks from caregiving if that's possible. And we often say, don't wait, to try to till you're too exhausted to try to schedule that in. Try to plan that out ahead of time where you are taking breaks from that caregiving role. And keeping in touch with family and friends, that is important. And I know that's harder to do with our COVID situation at the moment, but checking in so that you don't feel lonely, that you don't feel isolated, because these are the things, taking care of yourself, these are the things that are going to give you the strength to continue to provide care. Getting help, and getting help is can be taken in a couple of different ways. So it could be in terms of support, that you need to have the support that comes from sharing thoughts, sharing feelings, your perspectives with others. And as I mentioned before, this could be individually with somebody that you trust, somebody that you have a wonderful rapport with. It could be with a professional counselor, if that is important to you. It could be a part of an Alzheimer's Society support group. You need to find the format that fits you best, and that's the key thing there. But getting help could also be about the practical help that may be available to you as well. And I know that a lot of caregivers and family members say it's really hard for me to ask for help. It's even harder for me to accept it because I'm always the one that wants to offer that and help people. But asking for help is not a sign that you're an inadequate caregiver. It is not. You cannot take care of the person with dementia all by yourself. It's not healthy to do that. Um, there could be other people around you that just want to reach out and help. You just don't know how to. So you may need to articulate that to them and say, this is would be really helpful, whether it's picking up a couple of groceries, right? Or doing a porch drop, that kind of thing. Whether it's looking to the Alzheimer's Society for some further help and assistance, somebody to talk to, those are really good strategies as well. And then our final one is about planning for the future. And I know, again, for a lot of family members and caregivers, looking to the future can be a bit overwhelming at times. I don't deny that. But planning for the future can also help to relieve stress. And if at all possible, to review with the person with dementia or memory loss, to review their financial situation, to be able to plan accordingly down the road, to make choices related to their future health and personal care decisions is important. And if you can, have those conversations and record the information, it's really going to be beneficial for you going forward. Legal and estate planning, that kind of thing. And also for caregivers to look at an alternate caregiving plan in the event that something may happen to you to limit your ability to provide care in the future. So again, it's another work that's called creating a backup plan. And we talk about, what happens to the caregiver, what happens to the person with dementia if something does happen to that primary caregiver. And we want to look at the ways to make sure, we have some peace of mind knowing that both parties are going to be well cared for. So planning for the future is another great way to reduce that caregiver stress. So just a few other self-care tips for the caregiver that may be important. And again, this is not necessarily new information. Sometimes it's nice to just be reminded of the things that can really impact and benefit our health and well-being. So being flexible about our expectations. And I say this especially now, given our current physical distancing circumstances. This is the time to be more flexible. I know many of us have found that we kind of throw up our hands up in the air sometimes and say, oh, I don't really know what tomorrow brings, but I'm going to do the very, very best that I can. And that's enough. Being able to say that you're doing the very best that you can and being flexible that it may not, each day may change as we go. So hard for those of us that are very organized and routine. It can be hard to adapt to some of those changes and not having control over the situation. Trying to be positive and, as I said, keeping that sense of humor. So, if you're finding it hard to find humor, watch a funny TV show or a funny movie, read a humorous book, or call up a friend that always knows how to make you laugh, because the humor part of things can really get those endorphins working and make you feel really good. So there's lots of different ways to do this. And, I've recently discovered, my children have actually discovered those funny home video TV shows, and they put them on, and there's nothing like hearing that laughter. So think about that for yourself too. If that's something that you could just carve out a few moments of your day to check in with a funny show like that and really have a good laugh. Be aware of the signs of stress and how it can affect your health and ability to provide care. So I keep saying this. I want you to really understand the importance that we don't want to ignore those signs and think that they're just going to go away. And again, taking care of your own health. It's not selfish. It's important for you to continue to provide that caregiving role. Avoid isolation, loneliness by maintaining contact with friends or family members as much as possible. And again, I know with our current situation that is harder to do. Um, I've I've heard lots of different strategies for doing this. Our virtual world has made that a little bit easier. To do like a face chat or to use Skype or Zoom calls so that it's not as effective as being in person, having that in-person visit, but it certainly helps us to avoid that loneliness and isolation by being able to see people face to face. So it could be on the phone, it could be by virtual means. Also, think about joining a virtual caregiver support group if you haven't. Our society, we started that, and it's been very successful so far. We really encourage you to take part in that if that's something that you feel would be helpful. We also have activity and social groups or other, education sessions like this on an ongoing basis, so that it's a nice way to connect with others that are going through the same thing, to experience those day-to-day issues, right? And to face the challenges, to face the grief and loss. It's easier to do that with others and those that are going through it. It's not a sign of weakness if we need to seek professional help, because if our feelings do become overwhelming, we may need the assistance of a professional counselor to talk about those things. It is not a sign of weakness that you need to speak to somebody to assist you with that. It again is going to keep you strong. It's going to, increase your ability to continue to provide care in that dementia journey. Take time to acknowledge that you may be grieving even before the person dies. And this is something that we talk with our caregivers a lot about, that we are grieving the changes and the losses. And, we understand that dementia is going to affect the way the brain works and affect the way that that person is able to do certain tasks and activities. So we can be grieving those things, and it's important to acknowledge that and to be okay with the fact that you are grieving. Taking care of yourself. So here's just a few other things to kind of capitalize on what we've talked about before, to make sure that you stay strong and healthy for the person. So make sure that you might be providing the nutritious meals and snacks. Make sure that you are also eating nutritious meals and snacks. And it could be harder for you to find time to sit down to a full meal, but maybe eating little bits throughout the day. That might be more conducive to your schedule. So try to eat more things throughout the day, and try to, not go to the convenience foods. Try to make sure that you can plan ahead so that you are eating healthy. If you can get regular exercise, and again, this isn't selfish, and this is just the perfect time of year to get out for a lovely walk when the sun is shining. It's not too hot or humid yet. It's lovely to hear the birds singing and just to feel the warmth of the sun. It's a great way to get that exercise in, to kind of clear your brain from sometimes the fog that can accumulate when you're feeling tired or you're feeling stressed. Getting that exercise, walking the dog, going for a bike ride if that is what pleases you, or even being out in the garden can be considered a form of exercise. So Think about the things that are important to you and make sure that you're participating in that. Finding ways to relax. Again, this isn't selfish. This is for your own stress relief, your own health and well-being. And it's going to be different for every single person. I often joke that I've met lots of people that say they find those Sudoku puzzles really, really relaxing. Oh, not for me, right? I know that about myself. That's actually an activity that would create more stress for me. So it's different for every person. You have to find what works for you. It could be listening to music. It could be reading a book or taking a walk or having a bath. It's different for every single person. And if you can find 5 or 10 minutes in your day to carve out time for that activity, it really is going to benefit you in the long run. So don't think of it as selfish time. Think of it as time that is needed to strengthen and fortify you to continue to provide that care. Getting enough sleep. I know that's something that can be very difficult at times because there may be a lot going on in your head, and or the person with dementia may be up in the night and not be sleeping well, and so you may be up responding to that and caring for the person. But if we can do our very best to get sleep, and if this is becoming an issue, it would be a good thing to talk to your healthcare provider about that. See if there's some ways that the doctor may be able to assist you with that, some different strategies and so on. But sleep is really key. Our brains need sleep. We need sleep to function at our best and to continue to deal with not only the joys that happen every day, but also the challenges too. So we want to make sure that our brain is fortified. There is that one about staying in touch with friends and family. And we know, again, we can't say this enough, that we don't want to lose connections with the folks that mean the most to us, because they're the ones that may be able to help see us through those big challenges, to make us smile, to make us laugh, to focus our attention away from something that's troubling us, and to bring a gift into our day. Friends and family really can provide that sense of strength to us. Don't forget about your interests and your hobbies. It is key that you continue to do those things. It doesn't have to be every day either. Maybe you don't have time for that in your caregiving schedule, but we don't want you to lose sight of the things that are of interest or provide meaning for you. That's almost like giving up a little bit of yourself. And we don't want to do that. The person with dementia doesn't want you to have to give up that part of yourself. They want you to continue to enjoy life and to live well, even as busy as you are with that caregiving role. Don't forget to ask for and accept help where you need it. I know it's tricky, but I want you to think about, the words of wisdom that you might give to somebody else in a similar situation. We're always really good at sharing our words of wisdom and our suggestions for other people, but we're not always so great at accepting it ourselves. So it's okay to say, yes, I could really use somebody to just go pick up some bread and milk today. That would be really, really helpful for me. And just to leave it on my porch, that would be so great, because then I don't have to, try to figure out how I'm going to get to the store. And accept that help too, because a lot of the time, we've watched caregivers. We've maybe helped them put in place some different supports that may assist them, and then we get all the way up to the point where that service or that activity is going to happen, and then they kind of go, oh, no, I think I'm okay. Because it's that acceptance piece, that that decision to actually accept the help that's being provided, that can be difficult. So you will definitely see the benefit in being able to accept that help. It will go a long ways toward helping you to strengthen your ability to provide care as the dementia journey continues. And I, of course, want to share ways that we can support caregivers or family members that are supporting somebody with dementia or memory loss. Because I think this is so important for all of us to know how to be a good neighbor, a good friend. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is to listen to them without judgment. Uh, we don't necessarily know what it's like to be in their shoes. So if we can listen and understand, um, and not judge what they're telling us, not judge the emotions or, the way that they're able to talk about their experiences of being a caregiver. There's that suggestion that I just mentioned. You don't always wait for the caregiver to say what they need. It may be really helpful to offer help, with an errand or to do a porch drop. Especially with our COVID-19 precautions right now, we do mention that if at all possible, we want to avoid seniors going out and coming into contact with the virus. So if it's possible that a family member or a neighbor or a friend can go and grab a few items for you and do that porch drop, please, don't hesitate to reach out and offer that service. It's also important that we support caregivers by learning about dementia so that we understand when they're talking about some of the changes that the person is experiencing, and we know how to respond with knowledge and a true understanding or empathy for what they might be going through. So if we can learn about it, then we're really helping to support everybody in the situation. It's also essential that we reach out and keep in touch. A short phone call, that virtual visit that I was mentioning before, it can help that person feel less isolated. And they may not think in their day about stopping to give you a call or to organize that face chat virtually. But if you reach out to them, they may be so, so grateful for your contact at that time. You might be calling them at the perfect moment, and just the time where they needed to hear from you. So don't be afraid to do that. I know a lot of folks say, well, I don't want to bother them. I know they've got a lot on their plate, but you could be making the biggest difference in their life and their day, right, by giving that phone call. We want to continue to include the person with dementia, in everything that we're doing, whether it's that phone call, whether it's that chat. It's always so important to make the person with dementia feel included in that activity. Offer to have a virtual visit or a phone conversation with the person with dementia so that the caregiver can have a break. And that's especially important right now, given our COVID-19 precautions where we can have, those face-to-face visits. But maybe the caregiver just needs to go and have a bath, for 20 minutes, or go and put in a load of laundry and feel very secure about being able to do that because the person with dementia is engaged in having that conversation with somebody that they trust. And those are key things. We may not think a lot of that. We might think, oh, that's not really a big thing to be able to do. But I assure you it's huge. It's huge for that caregiver to just have that break in their day if at all possible, especially if it's been a challenging day. So that was a lot of information. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of your lovely faces. And I know that was a lot of information to talk about, but I really want to open it up to any questions or comments that you have related to what we've talked about, today. Anybody at all? Oh, I think David's talking, but I think he's muted. Sorry, go ahead, David.
It's easier said than done. All of the advice there, but one of the challenges I find is giving this sort of information to other family members that don't spend much time with us. They phone. Actually, we have a weekly Zoom meeting with the kids, and that's good, but they don't really know and understand what's going on. And so it's nice to see them, but they're not much of a support.
Okay.
Hmm.
So do you think, David, that maybe the recording after, like you could send them this recording and have them listen to some of the strategies and tips?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think it might resonate a little bit?
Yeah, it might.
I know
It's
it we hear that a lot, that it's very hard for those that may be caring at a distance or living at a distance. They don't always know what the day-to-day challenges are,
right.
and so they're not there to see the changes, they're not there to see the challenges, and so they think they're kind of in their happy little bubble, thinking that everything's just going along tickety-boo, and it may not always be. They don't always recognize that the level of support that you need.
The other thing is that people say, well, what can I do to help? And that's a really hard question to answer, for me anyway. Um,
In
yeah,
what
I don't
ways?
know.
In what ways, David? In what ways is it hard? Like, to be able to provide something practical that they can do,
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
to give them strategies?
No, if somebody asks me, well, can we help with anything? And I really can't think of any practical way they can help. No.
Yeah. And I know it's harder right now too, right? With our current situation, it's harder
Mm.
for people to come up with practical ways that they can help. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely understood. I definitely know what you're talking about there. Any other comments about that? Oh, Jennifer, yeah.
I just had a thought, David, that might be helpful for you, is maybe when you're coming across some challenges that you're facing, you can make a list. And then when somebody's asking if they can help, if that's an appropriate match, maybe, of a task that they could help you with. Sometimes having that list is helpful. When you're asked on the spot, what can I do to help? You can kind of refer back to that list.
That's a great point.
I'll take that as advice. Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to know, right? If somebody calls and says, right then, what can I help with? What do you need? Your brain might be scrambling to try to come up with that. But like Jennifer, that's a great suggestion. If you can kind of keep a list of some of the things that people could help with, and then you're not having to kind of rack your brain and think of those things on the spot because you've already got a list to go to. So I really like that suggestion. Other thoughts or questions about what we've talked today? So yes, I know sometimes this information, it can sound like it's easier said than done, but what we really need you to recognize, I think if you don't take anything else away from the session today, that we need to recognize the signs of stress and not ignore them, not push them away, and do our best to respond, because I know everybody's situation is different, but we just want to make sure that we stay strong and as healthy as possible to continue to support the person. So those are key thoughts. And you may have also come up with your own ways of coping. Maybe there's some things that aren't on the list today that you may find helpful. And if so, please do share with us, because those aren't endless lists. Those are just some of the things that, we know in talking with caregivers, what's for them. Good.
The sound's disappeared. I can't hear you.
Oh, is that right? Can nobody hear me right now?
Oh,
I can hear you.
Okay.
maybe you were just talking quieter.
Quietly?
Or
Okay, I'm
moving away
sorry
from
about
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry about that. Sometimes I know and I'm sure internet connections sometimes get a little spotty too, so it may be a result of that. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Leslie?
Why did the chicken go to the seance? To get to the other side.
There's the humor that we were talking about that's so important. Thank you for that.
David, did you hear about the claustrophobic astronaut?
I can see that'd be a problem.
He just needed a little space.
Oh, right.
These are bad dad jokes.
Okay.
Good to hear them, though. It's good to have that humor. Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we leave our session today? I wanted to let you know that next week's topic is going to be a little bit of a change. It won't be provided by me, although I'll be here. Our lovely Anne-Marie Peters has a great presentation that she wants to provide on grief and COVID-19. So there's been, I don't know if some of you are on Facebook, there's been some great resources that are circulating around the grief that people are feeling around COVID-19. And so I think it's so timely that Anne-Marie is going to talk to us about that next week. So, so if you'd like to tune in next Tuesday, we'd love to have you participate. And I'm really looking forward to what Anne-Marie is going to share as well. So
Good.
We've done pretty well for time. Any questions that I missed in the chat pod, Megan, at all?
No, there's none.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all very, very much for your participation today. I hope the information has been helpful to you in some way. And the last thing that I want to mention, normally I always have handouts that I can give out as part of our in-person education. But if you go onto our website, under the brochures and publications, there's some great pamphlets that are on caregiver stress and reducing caregiver stress that you can certainly have a look at and print off if you would like. So those resources are there to support you as well. And if you can't find them, please just shoot me off an email and I would be happy to email them out to you. Oh, and Leslie.
What's happening tomorrow on Happy Hour?
Oh, I haven't looked at the Wednesday. It'll be Jen. Happy hour, or do you mean the morning show?
Morning show.
The morning show.
Sorry.
I think Jen's doing her Minds in Motion tomorrow.
All right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So yeah, we hope that you'll join us every day. There's always lots of neat things going on. So you can drop on between 10 and 11 in the morning, and then we have our Alzheimer happy hour every day from 2 till 3, and that's a lot of fun too. So we hope you'll consider joining us for those as well. Okay.
So.
All right, everyone. Oh, David, yeah.
Yeah. If this is recorded, how do we? I might try and send it to the kids if I. So would you send it to me, or do I go onto the website and get it?
So all of our recordings we're putting onto our YouTube channel, so you can look up the Alzheimer's Society of PKLNH, and I'm going to do my best to get that uploaded today. And then our wonderful web developer, he's also going to post it to our website, and there's a new page there under video resources, so you can see the one that we did on enhancing communication, and then today's will also be there.
Okay.
Just give me a little bit of time to get it uploaded. The files are really big, so it takes a little while to do, but yes, they should be there for you. Bearing any technical difficulties, they should be there for you, and you can just easily just have the person send them the link and they can go there and listen. It's a little harder for us to be able to email the file because it's pretty large. So
Right.
There's 2 different places that it will be. But David, just let me know if you're having a hard time finding it. I can send you the links as well.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, everyone. It was so lovely to see your faces today. Thank you for tuning in.
Great job, Sarah. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank
Great
you.
job,
We look
Sarah.
forward
Thank you.
to seeing you all again. Thank you. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Enjoy the sunshine and the nicer temperatures.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Leave.